Hi there, my name's Bryony. I'm a psychologist and the head of coaching here at Relish. And welcome to our YouTube channel. We'd love you to subscribe and like the videos that you enjoy. We put up new content regularly, so there's always something to see. We generally give really good relationship advice, if I do say so myself. So definitely subscribe if you're interested in learning more. Today we're talking about 8 unconventional tips for a healthy relationship. So you've probably heard a lot of kind of the same advice around having a good relationship. So it's all about date nights and communication and being nice to each other, which we know works, but sometimes it can be helpful to have some less conventional tips as well. And some of this advice I give might be a little bit controversial and it might challenge some of your ideas around relationships too. So I'd encourage you to keep an open mind and remember that a lot of what we talk about is evidence-based, so we're not just kind of coming at it from left field. And these are really interesting concepts because they can be a little bit, go against our intuition, but we know that they have been helpful for Relish members. So let's get started. The first tip is don't solve every single conflict. So I guess this would be, in other words, pick your battles. We know that it's really important to speak up in a relationship if there is an issue, particularly if it's repeating. But we also know that if we're spending a lot of time raising issues, that's going to create a tension-filled atmosphere and also be perceived as perhaps nagging or complaining a lot. So it can be really helpful to kind of identify an issue that's impacting you and reflect on, is it worth bringing this up? Is this something that is important to talk about? And if it is, choosing a time to discuss it when you're both calm and emotionally resourced as well. So this means that you're not spending multiple times a day raising up an issue or criticizing your partner. It means that you can kind of contain that to a space of time where you can discuss things calmly. So this can take a bit of practice, and it's really important to speak up when you do have an issue, but it can also be helpful to keep quiet and see if you can live with it, essentially. The second step is to overlook the things that aren't working in your relationship. So just like with my first point, sometimes things don't need to be addressed. Sometimes things will just go away by themselves. And there's a lot of, research around the idea of focusing on what's going right. And this can be great in a relationship when people are stressed or when you're not necessarily getting along that well with each other. So instead of jumping into trying to fix everything, which of course involves identifying what's going wrong and what's not working, it can be really helpful to take a step back and reflect on what's going right. What are the things that you really value about the relationship? What are your rituals that you love? What are the things that you would really miss if you weren't in a relationship? So of course, don't overlook the things that are really important and the things that are really broken, particularly in situations of sort of high conflict or when there's emotional sort of volatility. But it can be really helpful to shift focus, and it's kind of all about our mindset, and it can be a conscious decision that, okay, today I'm going to really try and find the things that are going right in the relationship, and I'm going to try to focus on these and mention them as well. The third tip is don't be afraid to hurt your partner's feelings, nicely of course. So sometimes we can fall into the pattern of not raising issues because we don't want to stir the pot, or we don't want to kind of break the peace. And that's fine, but it can also mean that nothing actually gets raised. And sometimes being honest can be quite difficult, particularly if our partner is sensitive about something. So it can be really helpful to choose a time to speak to your partner, to give them some negative feedback, and do it in the most diplomatic and respectful way possible. And this will require some, brilliant communication skills on your part. But often if we can do this, it creates an emotional safety atmosphere. So being able to give negative feedback to our partner and deliver maybe some not so great news to them in a gentle, respectful and effective way kind of opens up the avenues of communication as well. So it makes it likely that they'll feel comfortable sharing some feedback with you as well. So, we could be worried about hurting our partners, but when we think about it, it's probably more hurtful to kind of store things up and not actually communicate directly with them. The fourth tip is to feel attracted to other people. So this is a really big one, and it obviously differs on each couple, but it is actually normal to be attracted to other people if you're in a relationship. Lots of the time people have crushes, lots of the time we can think other people are attractive. That obviously is very different from having an extramarital affair or engaging in infidelity. It's really just around recognizing your attraction to somebody. And if you have that comfortable relationship with your partner, you can even talk through this. So you can even talk through a crush that you have or a dream that you had about somebody. Esther Perel talks about this idea of the other, which is really fascinating, which is the idea of a third sort of person outside of the relationship. So whether that's a colleague or whether it's a friend or a celebrity, but it's basically the idea of this other person who exists outside of your relationship, who kind of adds some energy and dynamism to it. So you can talk through your partner around your attraction to them. You can talk about what it is that you're attracted to in them, and it kind of adds that sort of extra element of interest. So it also kind of makes it clear that you're making a choice to be with your partner. So every day you're with them, you're choosing not to be with other people. And having that openness and comfort talking about it can also mean that both people feel more secure, because, you know, there's that emotional honesty, and they're not necessarily off having an affair and being secretive about it. They're actually talking through how they feel and why they feel that way. So it's obviously not for everybody. Some people will be really triggered by hearing their partner talk about how they think somebody else is attractive. But if that does help in your relationship, it can be a really interesting and helpful conversation. So the fifth tip is to spend time apart. So again, this is a bit counterintuitive, particularly if you're a couple who is very, very close and spends a lot of your time together. But we know that when we look at the happiest couples and the couples who report the highest relationship satisfaction, a lot of the time they have other stuff going on in their lives. So they have hobbies, they've got great friendships, they go on trips with friends, they go on work trips, that sort of thing. So relationships need oxygen, and particularly when you've got busy lives and you're in each other's pockets, it can be really great to take some time apart and allow you to miss each other. So a holiday or a trip away, whether it's by yourself or with friends, is a really interesting kind of reset, because when you come home, obviously you're different. You know, everything at home is the same, but you've changed. And a lot of the time people will find that they really miss their partner after time away, and the things that they were feeling annoyed or frustrated with have kind of melted away, and they can then appreciate some of the more positive attributes. So it's really helpful if you're not getting along with your partner to even just strategically spend some time apart. So perhaps, you know, whether even if you're living in the same house, just kind of make plans to, you know, have meals apart, or to just have a day to yourself, to give yourself that opportunity to reset. Another tip is don't prioritize your children. So this is the most controversial one, I think. Obviously, we're not saying, you know, neglect your children, but essentially in relationships, a lot of the time the children can come first, of course, because their needs are so important, and they also need support and nurturing. That said, it is totally acceptable to prioritize your couple relationship as well at times. So maybe this means taking a weekend away and asking family to look after your children, or perhaps it is, you know, instead of driving your kids to extracurricular activities, you know, taking that time as a couple every so often to enjoy each other. So this is incredibly helpful, because we know that when kids come along, the relationship does take a back seat. So in some ways you have to kind of treat the relationship as an equally important member of the family, because of course we know that when the relationship is going well, your parenting goes well, and the family is sort of happier as a whole. So often we can expect the relationship to kind of take care of itself and function on its own, but it does need oxygen. It needs you know, kind of nurturing. It needs a lot of attention, you know, throughout the lifespan. So it's really important to kind of see your relationship self-care as important as all the other stuff that we kind of do in our lives. Another tip is let go of trying to be perfect. So again, when we look at the happiest couples and we look at all the research around, for example, the people who've come through COVID, you know, with higher relationship satisfaction than they did prior to COVID, a lot of their coping seemed to be around acceptance and around that idea that there's no such thing as a perfect relationship, there's no such thing as a perfect partner, there's no such thing as perfection, and actually once we can accept that our partners are human and that our relationships are always going to be a little bit wanting and disappointing, even if they're really good relationships, that gives us space to then work on it and enjoy it. So we might see perfect relationships and you know, partners on social media, but the reality is that they don't really exist, and having expectations of perfection mean that we'll be regularly disappointed. So the final tip is to try the Relish app. So Relish is the #1 relationship self-care app. Essentially, it's kind of like a light version of couples therapy. So there's relationship coaching where you can speak to a one-on-one coach who can offer you support and guidance. There's a massive lesson, a library of lessons, which has content from everything from trust, communication, intimacy, flirting, disconnection, parenting, blended families, self-esteem. So we basically cover every single thing that can come up in a relationship. It's really helpful. It's a lot cheaper than couples therapy, and it can be a wonderful way to kind of, I guess, support your relationship even if you don't have a whole lot of time or money to invest in it every single day. So I definitely recommend Relish, and you can also try it now 7 days free. So you can have a 7-day free trial where you can use coaching and do the lessons, and then decide whether you want to subscribe. So I hope this has been helpful. Please feel free to leave a comment below. Perhaps you've got some other unconventional relationship tips that you'd like to share with others. Like I said, subscribe to our channel because we have new content going up all the time, which is really, really helpful for relationships. And yes, I hope you found this helpful, and see you next time.